and they gave them the advice or the tool or the skill or the windows that helped to be able to overcome this terrible obstacle and struggle that was stopping them. And as a result, they were successful. And they lived happy ever after as a result. So we take Luke Skywalker. Does everyone know Star Wars? No? Oh, Star Wars just because if you haven't seen it, that's on you. Once upon a time, you pretty much know it anyway. Once upon a time, there was Luke Skywalker, and he had a desire to travel the universe and be a Jedi. And the obstacle was Darth Vader was going to destroy things with the Death Star, and they blew up a planet with the Death Star and were killing people, and it was also they killed and Luke's family were killed, and it was terrible. And along came Obi-Wan Kenobi, the mentor, and Obi-Wan he taught Luke how to use the Force, Luke. And then he fought against it, and he battled Darth Vader in the ships and found his way into the thing. And look, spoiler alert, blew up the Death Star by using the Force instead of, because the machine wasn't working. And happy ever after, they all get on stage, they get their medals. Romantic comedy, main character, generally two people. Guy and girl fall in love, right? They want to be in love. They've always wanted to be in love. But the problem is, it's just so difficult to understand the other sex. And so what happens is they have a series of terrible incidents where they keep misunderstanding each other, and they think to themselves, oh, that's it, it's not going to work. And then there's some incident, and this usually happens at the end, where they have some mentor that says something to them, and they go, oh my goodness. They give them this piece of advice. You need to look inside yourself. Do you really love them? I do really love them. And then the success, they run into a car, all the way, and where they find them? At the airport. And they say, oh, they hug each other. The person doesn't get on the plane. They kiss, and they live happy ever after. They never have another argument again. Very realistic, right?
Yeah.
The point is, this is the structure of Hollywood stories. It's also the structure of things. Once upon a time, there was a customer, and that customer wanted to ensure their home was as good as possible, was as worked as much as possible, was as efficient as possible, looked as good as possible. But the problem was their windows. That was their problem. And as a result of those windows, they were struggling. They were paying more than they did have. It was too. If they didn't get it, what was the struggle like? What were the consequences like? That's where the emotion is in number 4, number 8. The problem and the solution are number 3 and number 7, right? Or 6 and 7, let's say. But the consequences, where the pain is, that's the pain point. This is how bad it is if we don't change. This is how amazing it will be. And just to make this even clearer, I want to talk about turning points. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the brain just to get us all understanding here. Because I want you to know, when you talk to another person, you are affecting their brain chemistry. Your words, your voice, your face, your body language is literally affecting the neurochemicals known as neuromodulators that are happening in a person's brain. And let me explain how that happens when you tell a story. The first one is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone, the good chemical, the empathy molecule. It is a chemical activation where we're connected with someone, whenever we feel bonded with someone, they get on well. You give birth, massive burst of oxytocin is in the mother to connect her and bond her with her child. Now, the key is, it also happens in the business world. Whenever you empathize with someone, whenever you feel this person gets it, whenever you feel this person's really listening to me, whenever you feel this person really has my best interests at heart, oxytocin's released. So how's it released with a story? Well, every single time you tell a story where the person listening can connect with the main character, you are building oxytocin. Let's say I give you a story about someone you don't care about. You're not going to relate to the story. It's not going to affect you. But if I tell you a story and something about that main character you can relate to, you feel connected with, now all of a sudden, oxytocin is released and you bond with that character. So what does this mean practically from our perspective? When you introduce the character in your case study of a customer, try to find some way to connect that customer with the person you're talking to. Whatever they've said before, let's say they mentioned something before and they said, this is important. For them, well, actually, this was also important to them. You connect them to the main character. Once you've done that, now there's a connection between them and the main character. Now they care what happens to that main character. Everyone still with me?
Yes.
Then we go to cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. Oh, and what are you talking about? Why are you talking about cortisol? Cortisol is about stress. We don't want our customers to feel stressed. Actually, we do. Why? Because cortisol gets attention. Whenever your brain releases cortisol, you're paying more attention. If you go in there and you tell a happy story and you go, we work with a client and we provide this window service for them and they're so happy and this, that, and the other, they're going to get bored. You know why? Because there's no conflict. Imagine you went along to a story and you saw, this is a story about these two people and they met and they fell in love. And their jobs went really, really well. And then they fell even more in love. And then he proposed to her and she said yes. And they went on this beautiful, trip together and it was amazing. And they came back and they got promotions. And then they got engaged and then they got married and it was a beautiful wedding. And then they went on an amazing honeymoon. And then they just had these two beautiful Von Trapp-like children who looked perfect and were very healthy. And then they were also wonderful. And they had this big house and they, became president of each other's companies and it was amazing. And they lived happy ever after. Imagine you went to a movie where that happens. You'd be bored out of your tree. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You want something bad to happen. You want him to sleep with her sister or something crazy to happen because that's what gets our attention. That's what releases this cortisol and makes us pay attention. So when you're telling the story and when you talk about the struggle, that's when you're releasing cortisol because that's getting them to know I need to do something about that. That's where the urgency's coming. I need to solve this problem. If I don't solve this problem, pain, that's the cortisol. So every time you're sharing negative news or you're sharing a part where the customer's struggling, that's when you're triggering the release of cortisol. And I want you to see it in terms of chemicals because there's something about it that makes it real. And once they have that cortisol, then there's a need. And that's when you bring in the final one, dopamine. Dopamine is associated with motivation. But when a story's going well and when the person's about to achieve their desire, that's dopamine. That's when you're painting the picture of perfection, painting the picture of happy ever after. So you're triggering that release of that chemical. And now all of a sudden, they're now driven to succeed, driven to win. Driven because they have that happy ever after. So as you're talking to people, you're triggering these three chemicals. And when you think about it like that, it makes it easier for you to do it consistently because you know you're actively doing something to their brain. Is this clear enough?
Yes.
And by the way, TV shows do this all the time. At the end of every episode of MacGyver 24 or whatever it is, cortisol. You need to know what happens next. And what they do is they put the dopamine at the beginning. So as soon as the next episode starts, dopamine, oh cool, everything's gonna be okay. Then cortisol at the end again. But is it? Then dopamine again. It's the same thing. You with me?
Yes.
And just a couple more things about stories, empathy, to be able to release oxytocin better, make the character relatable, give them the same desires as the person you're talking to, or give them the same obstacles. Remember I said at the beginning, people will relate to people, feel part of unity with them, joined with them when they feel they're the same enemy or they have the same vision. So are you giving them the same enemy? Are you giving them the same vision? Same desire, same obstacles. They have to be relatable in that way. Then we've got emotionality. Kind of talked about that ad nauseum, but raise the stakes. Let me give you one more of this. Let's say, for example, I tell you a story where I lost $1. Does anyone want to hear the story of the time I lost $1? But is anyone more interested in the story where I lost $20,000 cash?
Yeah.
You want to know that. Why? Because the stakes are higher. Because it matters more. Imagine Luke Skywalker. Imagine Star Wars, right? Instead of a Death Star, imagine Darth Vader was the champion of Tiddlywinks. And he was about to win the universe Tiddlywinks championship. Would Star Wars be great? Oh, I can't wait to see. Oh, I hope he doesn't win the championship. No, it wouldn't be successful. He had a Death Star. It was about to blow up an entire planet. That's pretty high stakes. That's why it matters. So when you're talking about Windows, you want to be able to make sure that you're not just talking about the smaller things, that you're emphasizing in the case studies and stories, worst case scenario, what they were really worried about. I'm sorry, raising the urgency is the other thing. It's that, why does it need to be done now? What will happen if they delay? And again, you don't have to tell them that, you're sharing the story. They were concerned that if they delayed it, if they left it another few months, this would happen. And the beauty of that is, you're not saying it will happen, you're just talking about the concern of a customer that you once worked with. It's in their voice, therefore you're not responsible for it. You with me? So, last sort of exercise. What is the worst case scenario if they don't make the change? I want you to discuss this with each other. What's the best case scenario if they do make the change? How can you incorporate them as a concern and a possibility through a story, success story? Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, discuss. Take 4 minutes to do this.
The front of their house completely falls off. I saw it happen.
I actually can tell you. So one time, a customer came into the showroom in Philadelphia, and he was this real Italian guy, and he owned an Italian restaurant over towards Philadelphia. So he comes in and he threatens my life. He says to me, he goes, "The last company I worked with did this," and he showed me Victor's house where the wall, literally, they had to take the entire wall off because of hollow windows, and the water got into the windows and into the walls, and rotted out the entire wall. They literally had to remove the entire side of his house.
Ryan saw one like that.
Yep. And he threatened my life over it. The redemption story is that we got him an appointment. He got new windows and everything's perfect.
Got a new side of his house.
I was gonna say, who gave him the side of the house?
Well, he had to hire a contractor to do that.
Yeah, you're right.
I had a lady at events where I think it was a reptile show. Dolphins, yeah. And so showed her the 30,000 to give away, still not information. And I said, so if you win, like, what would you do first? And there's your doors. It says windows. That's why. The hazing, fog, and condensation. I said, oh, well, glad that you know that's going on with it. The reason that's a red flag for us, the water invariably gets into the frame, it just rots the window from the inside out. She said, yeah, I know. One of my vinyl windows upstairs fell down and hurt the cat. I was like, okay. And I tell the story to people, I'm like, now don't go to people's houses and say, all your cats are going to die, right? But you can always say, like, this happens, right? If you let them leave it.
The bow window happened to this one lady. She had cinder blocks holding it up, like 3 or 4 of them. And I was like, well, what happened? Because I could see the run. She said, yeah, I want to fix it. My grandson was playing over there and it fell while he was in the window. He's okay. But she then shoved cinder blocks underneath her to prop it back up so water wouldn't get in her house until she got it addressed.
I remember talking to a couple pre-COVID. I had set them up. They pulled the couch away from the wall. And I was talking about rot when they pulled the couch away from the wall. The whole wall was bubbling. I think I probably told you about this all the times. They had to get work done on the foundation because the damage was that bad. I came back around. That was at West Lawn. I came back around last year and they had all the removal by Anderson done after the fact.
Yeah, it's crazy. I told you guys about it, but one time I ran into a lady about the stolen window. Do you remember me talking about that? Where it came down on her hand.
Oh, yeah.
She's like, I'm like, man, the stolen windows, they can be dangerous. You know, they're heavy metal, whatever. And she's like, they're fine. I garden out them all the time. See? And then, wham! It came down on her hand, straight to the bone, straight to the bone. So, yeah, and we called the ambulance or whatever, and she had to go to the hospital. I don't think she bought windows, but she wanted to show me. I didn't set her up for an appointment, so that's but.
Get to the close with.
I feel like urgency lies elsewhere at that point.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to. You can tell me. I wanted to check out that cheetah mode. Ask questions that way.
All right, 1 minute.
I'm more of a physical learner.
1 minute left. If you can do the action guides, that would be great. Just two bullets.
The guy comes on as soon as I saw the TV.
Hey, Mo,
We're talking shit.
what's up?
Normally.
We are.
Soon or
Thanks for that. I mean, there's a microphone right in your face.
No, that's fair. I didn't disagree. As soon as he comes out.
Okay, let's bring it back. So instead of asking you this time for the actions you're gonna take, what I wanna do is ask somebody to volunteer to say, you know, what's the worst case scenario for the client or for the customer if they don't decide to go with you? So what's the worst case that could happen? Who's gonna give me a go with that?
They can possibly end up doing it twice and spending double money.
Okay, end up doing it twice, double the money. Now, if we're gonna do that in the story, if we incorporate, by the way, round of applause. Let's think about it for a second. If we're trying to put that and we're optimizing how usefully we put that, what we would do is in a story, we might say this, we might say, you know, I worked with, you know, with a customer like yourself. They're, you know, they wanted this, they had the same, similar issue to you. They were concerned with a friend of theirs who, you know, tried to solve the problem with sort of a cheap solution. And then they had to do it again. They had to do it twice. And, you know, for me, that is obviously a concern, is that you do not want to do this in such a, and I would paint the picture a little bit more of how much hassle it would be. So I wouldn't even just say they have to do it twice. I'll probably lean into, well, what are all the problems with having to do it twice? So one is the cost, obviously, but is that the only problem? Imagine you have to get your windows done, and then a few months later, you have to get them done again. How much hassle is that? You get me? You get people to come into your home, you get them to adjust it, you have to be home, and it has to be, there's this big thing, and then you have to do it again. The waste of time, the waste of money, that's what you start to lead into. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Something that you can connect the storytelling and credibility, and I thought of this, I just didn't want to forget about it, is one thing that I think makes the stories better is if they actually happen, if they're actually true. You know, and sometimes we make up a story to make a point, but the testimonials that we get, I guarantee you can find one where they talked about their fear, they had that experience and how it was solved. The power of actually giving the story about that customer and then say, by the way, here's their testimonial after the work was done, and showing that. So I just think combining the two together,
You know,
storytelling with the credibility of the testimonial.
big round of applause. I always believe that every story you tell should be true, not necessarily every single piece of your way of describing the story is good, because quite frankly, even if you tell a story as honestly as possible, it's still going to be a distortion because our memories are not reliable. However, what I love about what you said particularly is you're able to give the testimonial at the end after you've shared the story. Because then you're kind of, you know, it's almost like proof and going, oh, by the way, I forgot to say, you know, just to show you the testimonial, you know, or even while you're telling the story, I'll show you the testimony a little bit later. Then you know, two for the price of one, you also build reliability because you make a promise and then you pay it off, right? So it's a great strategy. But again, I would recommend never make up a story, you know, oh, I talked, because whenever you do it, there's something that you give it away. Oftentimes you're like, oh yeah, I worked with a client called Mary, and Mary was really happy, and she was really happy with her service because she had a problem with her window, which is exactly like your one, actually. And she lived in the same house as you. In fact, does she live here? And she was worried about that, like, there's just something about it that's disingenuous that they can feel. So it's really, really important to make sure that we're, you know, aware of that. Let me hear from someone on the best case scenario if they do make the change. Who's going to give me that? Yeah.
Your comfort level will change.
Okay. A round of applause. The level will change immediately. And then what I would be wanting is, you know, again, for them, one of the things they said was their comfort level, you know, changed immediately. And then I would go into detail about it. So let's say, for example, you're talking about warmth. Warmth's a big thing, and they're worried about the cold, and it was freezing last winter, and blah, 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 blah. That's when you then lean into warmth, cozy, comfortable. You know, you're in a lovely, you know, next to the fire, whatever it is, you're elevating the importance of that emotion, that positive emotion, by giving more sort of, you know, going in more detail to it. So great example. We'll do one more positive, one more. Yes.
Your neighbors will all be so jealous.
Okay, round of applause. The way you might say that, because if you say just directly your neighbors will be jealous, most of the time that'll be fine, but for some people they'll be like, well, you know, it's almost like you're telling me that, you know, oh, it's almost like, are you trying to convince me now because you're telling me everyone will be jealous? So a lot of times it'll work perfectly, but it's just the rewording of it where we would say, you know, obviously, you know, we work with this client and they had a similar problem and they wanted, they knew that they had a beautiful house, but they knew that when people walked by, they knew their windows weren't as good as the rest of it. And they wanted people to walk by and be wowed. They wanted people to walk by and see this as the best house on the block. And that was for them. Obviously, I'm not saying this for you, but that was for them. That was important to them. Now, whatever you say, I'm not saying this for you, you're saying it for them. But you're saying, I'm not saying this for you. It's just how we talk. But then you go into, and what they found was this, that, and the other. And now their neighbors are jealous of them. But now, because it's framed in that way, all of a sudden, the customer is less likely to feel like you're trying it on because you're just talking about this person who now they're saying their neighbors are, but it's almost like a jest. You're going, their neighbors are jealous of them. And it's a throwaway line that doesn't mean much, but psychologically, it means a lot. Because here's the thing, when it comes to your neighbors being jealous of you, no one wants to admit that's what they want. Is that not fair to say? No one goes, I want great windows because I want my neighbors to be jealous. No one will ever articulate that, but that doesn't mean it's not true. So there's things that people say they want and they're able to own up to. There's things that they will never say they want, but they actually want. And it's about being able to notice the two, give them both, and they're going to be happy. But you never, when you give them both and promise them both, you make it seem like you realize that they don't care about the thing that they actually care about, but you are pretending that you know that they don't care about it. Is that clear enough?
Yes.
I think so. All right. Last but not least, here's what I want you to do. Final exercise, I promise. I want you to go back through just from the afternoon, the action guides. I want you to put them onto one page. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this, and then we're going to bring things around, do a Q&A, and bring this to a close. So again, bring all the different actions that you have on one page. Maybe on the same page as you started the other one, or a separate one. But I want you to have all the listed slides there.
24. Gonna have fun finding these extra ones.
Oh, so I was mumbling to you was.
Yeah, I'm gonna have people go outside.
I think she said she originally told you.
Yes, she did. Yeah, I got the flash. I got it tomorrow. I'm gonna talk to the guys about it again. I told everybody about it preemptively, and I was like, but tomorrow I'm gonna talk to them.
What?
No, she gets in it. Yeah, but you're-
Came back. Yeah.
What? That must have been the ones that she gave me. Yeah.
To go Memphis? How many were there?
250.
And did she say why they came back?
No, I didn't know anything. I didn't know they came back. I bet she just had extras.
So wait, what happened?
So that we're gonna go canvas for guests for the RSVP event because the mail didn't get sent out until late. So we figured, you know, hey, maybe that's the way to get some people.
There we go.
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever happened there. But yeah, that's. So and then we figure maybe if that works out, then maybe that's a good way to you know, if we're in a bind and it doesn't pull something in the wall too.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna end this video. So then you can swear as much as you want.